In Andrew's last speech, he said that we're not given any commandments in the Lord's Supper, but then he turns around and says that we follow the commands that they were given as if we were commanded to do so because we are in fact. That's Andrew Richardson against Andrew Richardson, and I don't need to say anything else. Then he goes into the broken cup argument and says that it'd be alright for him to use multiple containers because it'd be the best option for the moment. Well, we're using multiple containers because it's the best option for us at the moment. He says that our situation is not parallel to his situation and that God knows the intent of his heart. Just so long as Andrew is sincere, God will overlook his faults. If we use his reasoning, then there'd be no sense in us teaching anybody about baptism, musical instruments, or even the cup in the Lord's Supper. He then gives us some situations where he thinks that the situation would change the ethical response. Situation number 1. He gave us a passage concerning the Passover in Exodus 12:3 and asked if it would be a sin for the Israelites to get another lamb if they dropped their lamb on the floor. Yes, it would be a sin that would have 2 lambs. They could pick it up off the floor and they could eat it anyways, or they could go over to their neighbor's house and eat with them. If they were unable to eat with their neighbor, then God provided a special day for them to retake the Passover meal, which was on the 14th day of the following month in Numbers chapter 9. Situation number 2. He also asked if it would be sinful to break the speed limit law in order to get someone to the hospital. The laws of the land tell us to call 911 because the ambulance can get to you faster than you can get to it. It is always wrong to break the laws of the land, and we don't have the authority to sin when difficult situations arise. He gave a scenario about someone leaving worship services to go to the hospital for their family, and so I'm guessing that he's saying that they would be forsaking the assembly, and if that's what he believes, then my answer for his question is right there on the screen. Situation number 4. He says that it'd be alright to run out of a burning building instead of partaking the Lord's Supper, which I would agree. However, unlike Andrew, I believe that multiple containers and multiple pieces of bread may be used. So if the building caught on fire, we'd go get us another container and another piece of bread and serve the Lord's Supper somewhere else. Just because the Holy Grail went up in flames, it doesn't mean that we can't get another one. Andrew then goes into the straw argument, and he says that we like to use the word container instead of cup because it gives us much more wiggle room. Actually, we use the word container instead of the word cup because it gives you more wiggle room. If we said cup, then we wouldn't be able to use jars, bowls, or pitchers. He says that a straw is not a container because it can't preserve any liquid. And so I guess that's the identifying trademark of the container that has to be used. So you can use as many containers as you like, just so long as those additional containers can't preserve liquids. He then goes on to say that even if a straw was a container, that it wouldn't matter. Well, yes, it would matter, because my proposition affirms that multiple containers may be used in the distribution of the fruit of the vine. If a straw is a container, then you agree with me. However, he says a straw is not a container because it's not a cup. Well, a jar's not a cup either, and neither is a bowl. Now, for those who don't know, I gave an illustration earlier where there was a pitcher of Pepsi at Pizza Hut, and several individuals poured themselves a glass of Pepsi from the pitcher. I said if this were to be done, then we could still say that those individuals drank of that pitcher. He says that this is not parallel because the Pepsi started in a pitcher instead of a cup. So a pitcher's not a cup, and it would be a sin to use a pitcher during the Lord's Supper instead of a cup, because a pitcher is a source container and a cup's not. Is that what you're saying? Well, let's replace the word pitcher with the word cup. If all those folks poured themselves something to drink out of that cup, they would still be drinking of that cup. So even if Matthew 26:27 was commanding them to drink out of that one solitary container, which it's not, one could still drink out of the container by using multiple containers. His only objection was that this wouldn't be practical, so I guess if someone drank all of their beverage while they were having dinner with Brother Richardson, that he'd tell him, here, take a swig off my cup, instead of pouring them something to drink out of his own cup. What's more practical, pouring half of your beverage into their glass, or waiting for them to drink half of your beverage out of your glass? So once again, even if they were commanded to drink out of the same container, which they were not, then they could have drunk out of the container by pouring the contents of that container into their own container. Andrew doesn't know how many containers they used. If he could prove that, he would have done it, but he hasn't done it and he won't do it. All he keeps saying is that they drank of it. Yes, we realize that, but there's different ways you can drink of that container. He then says that Mark 9:41 is not parallel to Matthew 26:27, and nobody ever said that it was. Mark 9:41 uses the phrase a cup, yet you can give someone more than one cup to drink in the name of Christ. The phrase a cup does not bind the number of drinking vessels in Mark 9:41, and it doesn't bind the number of drinking vessels in Matthew 26. He says that one's a command and one's not a command, but he contradicts himself because he doesn't believe that either one of them is a command. He says that the Lord's Supper is to be done continually, and Mark 9:41's not. However, if you stop practicing Mark 9:41, folks, you're going to be cut off. Then he goes to Luke 22, and I'm amazed at some of the remarks that he made. It's quite clear that after he tried to use the Passover in Exodus chapter 12 to prove that situations alter our ethical responses, that he has never even studied the Passover meal. He also said that the cup being used in Luke 22:17 was the Paschal cup with a definite article. If I were a one-cupper, I'd say that Andrew believes that only one cup was used during the Passover meal. But I know better than that. Surely Andrew knows that there were 4 Paschal cups which were used, and each Paschal cup was divided into each individual's own container. He acts like I don't believe that Luke 22:17 was a Paschal cup. Everyone agrees that Jesus instituted the Lord's Supper with one of the Paschal cups. The cup which was used in Luke 22:17 is the same cup which was used in Matthew 26. We know this because Jesus said that he would not drink henceforth of the cup until he drank it new in the Father's kingdom. He said this in Luke 22:18 and Matthew 26:29. Same cup, same statement. He also says that I have Luke opposing Matthew and Mark, which is just a ridiculous rebuttal. If Mr. Richardson doesn't want to harmonize the Gospels, then he has Luke at odds with John, because John told us that Judas departed before the Lord's Supper was instituted, but Luke told us that Judas departed after the Lord's Supper was instituted. He asked why we don't use one container and then pour the contents of that container into different containers. And I've been given him the same answer throughout the entire debate. The reason why we use multiple cups is because the quantity is not specified, the container is not specified, and the method of drinking is not specified. Since none of these are specified, they are insignificant and can be expedited in various different ways. His idea is that you have to do it exactly the way that they did it. Do you wait until night to partake of the Lord's Supper? Do you partake of the Lord's Supper in an upper room? Do you also bind the hymn that they sung? If not, why not? We can't do what they did, but we can do what Jesus said to do. We are commanded to eat the bread and drink the cup. 1 Corinthians chapter 11 verse 26. You can't drink the cup, and so the cup stands as a metonymy for its contents. We eat the bread and we drink the fruit of the vine. Now into his pitiful explanation of the figure of speech known as metonymy, he gave us an example. It's before you. It says, the cup broke when I dropped it after drinking it. He says that, quote, grammar allows for a word to be used figuratively while its antecedents are used literally. If anyone knows a little something about grammar, then they'd realize how ridiculous his example and statement are. Notice how he says that the word can be used figuratively and literally at the same time. What word? A noun? What kind of noun? Proper, common, concrete? Earlier he said that language has a meaning. But if he believes that a word can be used figuratively and literally at the same time, then he's just taken the meaning out of the language. Furthermore, he says that this word, whatever that word may be, can have 2 antecedents. What I think he's saying about this example is that the common noun, which is the word cup, can be used figuratively and literally in the same sentence. This is an absolute unfounded principle. The cup is either literal or it's figurative. You can't have it both ways. If you notice on Brother Richardson's PowerPoint charts, he says that the second use of the pronoun it is a metonymy. It is not a metonymy. It is an ambiguous pronoun, and that's not a compliment. An ambiguous pronoun's not rooted in any real noun. The reason why the second pronoun is an ambiguous pronoun is because it cannot be traced back to its antecedent. The reason why it cannot be traced back to its antecedent is because the common noun has already been given its literal identity whenever he informed us that he had broken it. However, the only thing that the listener needs to realize and understand is that Andrew called the second pronoun a metonymy, which just goes to show that he has no clue what a metonymy is. How can you say that there is no metonymy being used when you don't even know what a metonymy is? If any metonymy were to be made in this sense, then it would have to be the common noun, which is the word cup. And the only way that this could happen is to remove the phrase which informs us that he had broken the cup. Then Mr. Richardson goes over to Matthew 26:28 and tells us that the demonstrative pronoun refers to its future antecedent. In other words, Andrew's telling us that the word this, which is the demonstrative pronoun, refers to the future antecedent, which is the fruit of the vine. He says that the demonstrative pronoun cannot refer back to the common noun, which is the cup. Well, why? He doesn't give us a reason, he just doesn't think it'll work. He makes this mistake by refusing to acknowledge the grammatical facts and rules. He says that a pronoun does not have to be traced back to its nearest antecedent. This is something that he should have learned back in 3rd grade. The word antecedent in and of itself ought to let you know that it precedes the pronoun. The only grammatical exception to this rule, which is not being made here, is to say that the demonstrative pronoun, which is the word this, is a part of a subordinate clause, which such is not the case. Simply, a subordinate clause is a clause or a group of words that cannot stand on its own. The phrase or clause that we have right here is that this is my blood of the New Testament. This clause can stand on its own, and so we have to trace it back to the common noun, which is the word cup. Thus, the word cup is a metonymic expression for the fruit of the vine. The reason why he can't accept the grammatical rule is because this is all he's got. When he loses Matthew 26:27, he has absolutely no other passages that he can go to. However, even if we met him on his own level, as I've already done, and let him believe that the cup was a literal container, he still couldn't prove that multiple containers are prohibited, because the command, drink ye all of it, is a generic command which can be expedited with straws, and if it can be expedited with straws, it can be expedited with cups, jars, and bowls. Again, my proposition has been sustained because my expedient has not been proven to be intrinsically sinful. He hasn't proven that the number of containers was bound, and so therefore they are loosed. But that's all for now, and this is Jonathan Whitehead with the Oracles of God YouTube channel, encouraging you not to go beyond that which is written.